Welcome to the Second Bite podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Todd Taskey. Today, I am joined by, with me, Lance Hollander. Lance, super happy to have you with me.
Thanks for having me, Todd. I appreciate it. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be great because you have been an agency guy for a long time. We met recently working on a project for a client of mine that we were selling. I'm going to say most notably participated in a transaction with Delphic, which was an agency in Philadelphia. You sold to Delphic Digital. A lot of folks probably know that name, but you had two or three other successes before that. And we're going to unpack a whole bunch of things. As in our time today. I'm just pleased that you could be here and share some of your experience.
Yeah, sure. Happy to drill through the whole thing, give you the background, where I was, what I'm doing.
And so why don't we kind of do it in reverse order? As you know, what I think is most interesting to listeners is understand kind of who you are. Why did you do a transaction? And then I'd like to unpack the transaction a little bit. And so at Delphic, you were there for 5 or 6 years that you had built that agency, and then you sold it to Hero, and you stayed at Hero for a couple of years, correct?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to 2018, because I think that's when you did the transaction with Delphic. Give me a descriptor of Delphic, what it did and who you did it for, and then how did the transaction start to come about with Hero?
Sure. So I had a couple of agencies before Delphic. Both my second agency and Delphic was an existing agency before I got there. And my partner at the time, Mark Patton, had it for 4 or 5 years before I got there. It was a small agency. It had maybe 10 people, maybe a couple million in revenue. But I thought when I joined.
Can I ask, because it's interesting, did you buy into the agency? Did he hire you? How did that work?
So I had previously sold an agency in San Diego, and the company that acquired me required me to move to Philadelphia. I didn't mind moving to Philadelphia from San Diego because I happened to grow up here. My parents were here. I love the Eagles. And I came back home. When that engagement ended, I met Mark, and we were just honestly at a party for our kids. And he said he's an agency guy, and I said I'm an agency guy, and we just started to become friends. And I was doing some consulting, and he had an office, and he said, "If you need a place to stay, come stay here." And I started hanging out there, and I saw it had good bones. And eventually, a 6-month conversation got into play where I said, if I can help you triple it, can I have half? And a long conversation short, he was sitting on a bunch of debt, and I took over half the debt. So that was the investment per se. I worked for the lowest salary of my life, and we got busy. Together, along with hiring a lot of smart people, we grew very fast. And we grew from, 2 million to 13 million in about 5 years. And it was year-over-year growth, 50%.
And what kind of agency was it, Lance?
So, full customer experience. My first agency was mostly media, mostly software rather. My second agency was mostly media. And Delphic was basically a development shop doing mostly Sitecore work, which was an enterprise content management system.
Right.
And what was neat about some of the clients is they needed a lot more than just development work. And we started to think about the entire customer experience. From the first impression, they saw an ad, all the way to what we used to say head in the bed, because we had a lot of hospitality clients. And every interaction along the way. And so we were doing media, SEO, analytics, CRO, and enterprise, industrial strength, web development. And then we started bringing in some large clients. Sunrise Senior Living was a very important client to us. It became our widest client. They were a $3 billion company that at the time was owned by KKR. And it's one of those clients that, through my 25 years, I would say the most interesting work I ever did, oddly enough, just because when you think about, challenging decisions in life, where to put your mom is up there in terms of emotional decision. It's a very high price point. And if you take that to a customer experience level, it's complicated. And by doing that really complicated work, we were able just to raise the bar of the quality of work we were doing. And then we would go out and we got other clients like American Standard, like Comcast, like Aramark. And it just kind of grew from there.
And so you guys are, by many measures, killing it, right? So you've more than quadrupled the business in a relatively short period of time. When did the idea get planted between you guys that, hey, maybe we should think about doing a transaction?
So I had 2 transactions behind me. I wouldn't call them home runs by any measure, but I had built and sold 2 other agencies. And even when I came into Delphic with Mark, we had an idea of getting to a certain size and then maybe start looking around. And if you look at some of the people in your business, I reached out to a few of them as we were growing. And what I basically heard from the M&A seller side folks were, you need to be about 10 million. That's when we'll start to talk to you.
Of revenue.
10 million, then you're interesting to us.
Yeah, 10 million of revenue, correct?
Revenue, yeah.
Yep.
10 million of revenue, as close to 2 million at EBITDA as you can be. And then, but you look really great, and we'll keep you in mind. And I said, great. And if somebody by chance is looking for a shop like us on the buy side, give us a call. Mm-hmm. And I kind of left it at that. And then we just kept on going around our business. We were actually having a challenging year in 2017 in the sense that one client was falling off the rails, challenging client, and sometimes that happens. Another client was doing incredibly well for us. That was kind of evening it out, but it was a stressful situation. So we weren't ready to sell yet, but then lo and behold, the phone rang. And it was some M&A folks representing Hero Digital, and they were looking for a certain type of agency. We told them who we were. They got extremely interested. Hero Digital was, I think, north of 20 million, about 120 people. And they had a lot of private equity.
Yeah, they had private equity behind them, right? Yeah.
The CI Capital out of New York was behind them. Had purchased them earlier. They were looking to make their first large acquisition. And they were Adobe doing AEM work. We were Sitecore, both enterprise content management systems. They had some other work with Stafflog, I guess would be the way to say it, and they were doing some great creative work and some back-end Salesforce work as well. We had media and stronger analytics and CRO, great UX on both sides. And together, we thought it would make something much bigger, much more compelling offering. Together, we'd be over 200 people. We'd have an East Coast, West Coast office. While we were acquired, in many respects, it was framed as almost like a merger. They would be on top, but more of a merger situation. And it appealed to us for a whole host of reasons. And CI Capital was gave what I thought was a very fair offer. They also gave a very quick earnout. So
a couple of things. The notion that it was a merger rather than an acquisition, or was that mentally or emotionally, was that important to you guys?
No, I mean, I honestly, in hindsight, it was probably more of a sales technique to get us to.
But also, regardless of the language that they, I'm sorry to step over you like that. Regardless of the language they used, it doesn't make much of a difference, right? I mean, they're one side. It's once it's combined, I think the importance is your decision about how much cash am I going to take, how much equity am I going to roll forward, and what is the earnout going to be? Were all three of those components part of your deal?
Yes, all three were. It was funny. A friend of mine sold his company to WPP, and after I had left Hero, and after he had left WPP, he was starting a new venture, and he called me and said, "Do you want to hop in?" And I said, "Actually, I have a 5-year non-compete. I can't." And he said, "Are you out of your mind? You signed a 5-year non-compete?" And I said, "Well, how long was your earnout?" And he said, 5 years. And I said, "Mine was 3 months. We signed the same deal. I just don't have to be there."
Yeah.
And it was part of the reason that I thought it was interesting.
So give me in whatever way you can share it. You guys are 50-50 partners, you and your partner, Mark. You got a transaction done. Can you give me an idea of the size of that, the multiple range, or anything like that?
So Mark and I were 45-45. We actually gave 10% to the executive leadership team. We did that in the form of phantom units. We wanted to take them along for the ride. We had done that before we sold. We thought it was important to do that. It was a generous offer. I think, I don't know if you count the cash or don't count the cash. If I count the cash, it was probably 8.5, 9.
So 8.5 or 9 times EBITDA.
Yeah.
And when you say count the cash, you mean you guys were able to take the cash off the balance sheet at deal close?
Yeah. I mean, we had working capital to deal with and whatnot, but it was a reasonable and pleasant negotiation for the most part. And again, don't get me, these things can be difficult to close.
Sure.
Attorneys love to get involved and make things difficult sometimes. Couple of furballs along the way when that happened. And overall, it was good.
Good. And I want to unpack that. A couple of immediate questions. So whatever the number on that was, so the multiple's a nice multiple. Did you guys have the option of what percentage of cash and what percentage of stock, or did they dictate here's the maximum amount of stock you can get, or what have you?
I think we could have negotiated that any way we liked. The way they laid it out was fine with us. We were okay with numbers. And
did you guys have to take the same percentage in cash and in equity, each of you?
We didn't, but we did.
Okay.
Yeah, we were just, we were pretty happy with the offering in general. The interesting thing was, we actually, I think we closed the deal and technically we closed it maybe in September of 2017. But my earnout was based on the 2017 revenue.
That full year, even though you signed 9 months in.
Yeah. So, it was based on the 2017 full revenue. So our last 3 months, and again, this is I guess the advantage of, giving 10% to your ELT.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Right.
And I cannot believe how the team and the whole company hit the gas like we've never hit the gas before. It really showed me what we could have done.
Well, it's a very interesting concept. People can go back and listen. We did an interview with Matt White, and Matt, we did a transaction for him 5 years ago, actually. And he, based on his age and his life goals, he wanted a 5-year earnout. And it was a formula driven. We talked about it on that episode. He gave half of the earnout to his management team. And each of the 5 years, they exceeded the earnout number and they got paid for it, right? Because it was formula based. So it's always amazing to me how motivated
Sure.
a big upside is for a management team. So last year, we did a bunch of deals and my clients elected to roll forward 50% at one extreme and I think 15% at the other extreme. How much did you guys decide you wanted to roll forward into the Hero acquisition?
North of 20, south of 30. I mean, it was 20 to 30%.
Yeah. So that's a pretty healthy amount, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were excited about the opportunity and what the plans were, for sure.
So if we can, so first of all, you get cash, but you guys, I assume, had escrow that you had to put aside and reps and warrants and all like that.
Yeah. Yep.
That was probably not new to you because it was your third transaction. Anything surprising about that you wish you would have known, the holdback and the escrow and that process?
No, that was actually pretty
straightforward.
It was all reasonable.
Okay.
It was reasonable. The working capital was a little new for me at the time. Mark and I did it ourselves. We relied on our attorney to help us with the negotiation. In hindsight, probably should have used a self-service like you. That probably would have been. Again, we weren't looking to sell when we sold. We just got this phone call, and it was the right time for us personally to do it.
Why do you say you should have hired somebody? Because you saved a couple $100,000 probably or so in a fee.
I think some of the terms that I signed up for, I probably would have dodged along the way.
Can you give a couple examples?
So yeah, simple example. Hero had a CEO. They didn't need two CEOs. Eventually, as it happens often, the founders kind of butt heads with the management, and unfortunately, I am not a delicate flower when it comes to those things, and I express my opinion easily. And when I left, they had the ability to either buy me out or not buy me out. Entirely their choice. In hindsight, I probably would have put some governors in there to given me some choice if I could keep my equity in or not. And I think I could have gotten that. And it's just hindsight.
Sure.
The other hindsight is
just curiosity. So when you left, did they buy it all back or no?
They did.
They typically do, right? They value their equity in many cases more than their cash.
They bought it all back. I took that cash and I made 6 investments of my own, and I'll see how those work out. Okay. But my thinking was I had all my eggs in that basket. Let me spread those across, and I did some fun things with those investments. But I saw that as if all your money was in one stock, would you leave it there?
Sure.
I said no, so I put it in other places.
So a couple of interesting questions then. You remained at Hero for how long?
More than 1, less than 2.
Okay. Your non-compete, and this is one of the things that there's usually 2 agreements that you sign. There's a purchase agreement and then there's an employment agreement. Both of them typically will have a non-compete. The one tied to the purchase agreement is always the most enforceable. Less and less enforceable is the employment agreement. Do you remember that you had a 5-year non-compete that was on the purchase agreement, or was it on both?
I don't think I recall. I think it was on the purchase agreement. I mean, the basic gist of it was don't take our people, don't take our clients.
Sure.
You can be in the business, just, don't infringe on what you sold.
Did the 5 years start from transaction date or from the date that you left?
Date that I left.
So that would be tied to your employment agreement, which makes sense, right? But this is the point for folks listening in. There's when you do a transaction, there is a non-compete. There's non-compete and there's non-solicit. Non-solicit can't go after customers, can't go after employees. That's almost always 5 years. The non-compete, you being in the same business, is always a point of negotiation. and is always in the language, that would be 5 years from the time of the transaction. Then you, as you know, you also had an employment agreement, and there's a whole nother set of terms in there about what you can or can't do. Typically, they're identical, but the time frame that it gets measured is different.
Yeah.
And it's usually from when you depart, right?
Correct.
From that standpoint.
That's how it worked out.
In hindsight, when you look at the non-compete, what are your thoughts or observations or advice you would share with fellow agency owners?
So it really was a tough negotiation when it came to that. And what happened was they were looking for a difficult document for both my partner, myself, and our executive leadership team. And I thought that was a little over the top. And
you say difficult agreement, meaning very restricted.
Too long. Yeah, it was just too long.
Too long of a period.
Especially for the executive leadership team who, did not have the same ownership as my partner and I.
Yeah, and they didn't get a big chunk of money when.
Right. So, right. Basically, we negotiated their terms down and agreed to their terms for us. And I, at the time, thought it was the right thing to do because, different exits for all of us. Mm-hmm. But other than that, no, I guess I was okay with it. I mean, I stuck by it. If I was really upset with it, I probably would have done something before now, and I'm about to do something again. But I did other stuff. In my time, I did some consulting. I worked with private equity. I had another transaction along the way that was non-agency like. It's been a fun break from the day-to-day of the agency space. Some people might be upset by it, but I think I'm okay with it. I mean, I signed up, and whatever I signed up for, I agreed to.
So let me ask this, because I hear this from guys a lot. So I've been in the agency business my entire life. This is what I hear, right? I've been in the agency industry or business my entire life. I can't have a 5-year non-compete. I don't know how to do anything else, so I can't. And then I had a really good again, another episode with Felix LeBoy, who sold his agency much longer ago than you did. And he talked about how many things opened up to him.
Yeah.
After he did a transaction. Can you talk about that? And can you talk about the concern you had over a 5-year non-compete? In hindsight, do you think that was really warranted?
So it opened up a lot of opportunities, and I've enjoyed the non-agency time I've had. I mean, I did some consulting along the way. I could have done an agency, don't get me wrong. I mean, I wasn't prohibited from doing the business that I love, and I've been doing my whole life. I was just prohibited from doing it with those clients and those people.
Could you go do another Sitecore business if you wanted to?
Yeah, I think I could have. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and read it, but I think I could have. I just don't think we were doing so much work in customer experience that if you took, if you said you can't do all of that, it pretty much covered everything. So It was a digital agency that hit a lot of marks here. I could have done, an IT implementation business, but that's not my skill set. The opportunities that opened up were great. It allowed me to just think a little bit differently for a while.
Tell me about one or two specific of the opportunities, and how did they come to you?
Well, after Delphic Hero, I got introduced to a guy named Eric Yang, who had previously sold his agency to Essence that went to WPP. Another guy named Kevin Wu, who sold his agency to Dentsu. And the three of us started a company called The Agency Shop. And we were three guys who were agency guys who all had exits. And we started just looking around to see how we could use our experience in interesting ways. We were all getting phone calls all the time. And the phone calls are something like this. Hey, Lance, can I talk to you for a minute? Because I'm thinking about doing A, B, and C. And, talk to them for an hour about their agency or their piece. Agency owners would call me. And then you started getting calls from good friends who said, hey, Lance, a friend of mine could use your help.
Yeah.
So now I went to friends of friends.
Yeah.
And then we found ourselves spending literally 30, 40, 50% of our time just helping and advising people. And we said, there's got to be something we can do here, except just, help our network out, which I'm happy to do, but it was a lot of time. And we started, helping other agencies, influencing other agencies. We made a couple investments in some agencies. We started consulting for some clients on an equity basis, which was interesting. We started doing some work for private equity, helping them do digital due diligence, which was a ton of fun.
How did that happen? Did somebody say, geez, Lance has done a couple of exits, he can give us some insight, and they knew you were a free agent?
I think it was Kevin who knew someone in private equity, and they needed some help on one thing. They were looking at, it actually started out with someone introduced me to Eric because Eric had a consulting client for Deloitte, actually, for a large senior living company.
Mm-hmm.
And he was introduced to me because I had senior living experience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we went in and for Deloitte just to do due diligence. And companies like that, they're spending a lot of money in media. We looked at their media, and it was bordering on media malpractice. They were doing it so bad.
Wow.
And I pointed this out to them, and Deloitte was extremely happy, and it was a very good outcome for everybody. And after we did that, they'd introduced us to somebody and somebody else, and one thing just led to another. But that work for due diligence is a lot of fun. I mean, when private equity is going to buy something, they do the legal due diligence, financial due diligence, and there's this digital due diligence that we thought was needed. If you're spending $50 million in media, are you doing it right, wrong? Is the tech stack the right stack? Is the MarTech stack the right stack? Is the digital ecosystem flowing? Is the strategy right? All that was interesting work. And the most interesting part was the more things we found wrong, the more likely private equity would be to invest. It was sort of upside down.
Because they saw room for improvement?
Right. That's the value creation opportunity.
Right.
If they're doing it, we found one company that was doing everything fantastic. And the private equity company went, all right, we'll pass.
Yeah. So, that's very interesting. So let me pull on that thread if I can. The things that you have learned from your agency experience and then from consulting with private equity, if there was 2 or maybe 3 things that you could pass along to listeners about either what to do in a transaction or how to create value before they consider a transaction, what would those things be?
Well, the value before a transaction, have all the check boxes that they're looking for checked. I mean, you're looking to have, either vertical experience or software experience or expertise in, variety of different tactics that are interesting from a strategic perspective. You're looking to not have all your eggs in one basket. I mean, 80% of your revenue shouldn't come from one client by any stretch of the imagination. You want to have a healthy business where you're hitting as close as you can to 20% EBITDA. 15 to 25. Those are the field goals.
Yeah.
And you're looking to have a healthy team. Client churn is low. You have the right staff. What holes are there? How do you fill those holes? Who is filling what spots? The goal of a founder should really be to try to be the dumbest guy in the room. That should be the goal.
Right.
Hire really great people who you can really count on. And the team we built at Delphic is some of the best people I've ever worked for. Some of them are still there. Some of them moved on. But if you would ask any of them, he put the Avengers together, and they do great work. And that's what happened.
And what would you say as far as the proper headspace to be in when you enter into a process or a transaction?
If you see flags, there's flags. Know what you're getting into. And
elaborate on that? If you see flags,
how they negotiate, how they work with you, how they think you're going to fit into the organization. Is that exactly the way you envision it? And are you negotiating that so much that maybe it's not going to happen? One of the things that I think was interesting about what happened with us in Hero, for example, I think we had a really strong operational excellence, and it was so strong that I think it influenced the overall agency quite a bit in terms of our process of how we looked at things, everything from estimations to even how we worked our back end system of software to run the agency was very tight. And operational efficiencies are important. It's what creates the difference between 10 and 20% profit. If you know how to run your agency really strong, if you understand utilization and forecasting, and you know when to hire right before you need it, and you don't have people sitting on their hands doing nothing, that's how you make an agency really excel in terms of how they perform in both work product and in terms of financials. All of that's essential. So see who's buying you and see how good they are at that, because it's going to make a huge difference. The integration of the agencies. And if it's a big agency buying a small shop, well, you're just going to jump right in because they already have the systems and they're going. But in this case, it was two agencies that weren't that big a part in terms of people. They were larger than us in revenue, but merging them together, it took a lot of work. I mean, the first year was a challenge in doing that. We gave bonuses, they gave bonuses. But what happens if our salaries had a 10% bonus program and theirs had a 5% bonus program? Well, I mean, maybe we paid people differently in the base salary, but the bonuses were different. So,
and I think that's interesting when you have two companies of similar size, who's to decide the right way. If you are acquired by a larger business, you're just going to do it by. So let me ask this then. So you're past your non-compete, right? You're consulting and you're doing this and that. What is next? Are you going to continue to consult and just hang around with private equity guys?
So no, I mean, a few years ago, I started helping out an agency called From the Future. They were a small agency. They did really great SEO work. And then there was another agency in LA. I knew that owner, and we kind of merged the two agencies together. Been working with them for a while. When I think about my most enjoyable time in my career, it probably was when I was a smaller agency and I was growing from 5 to 10 million. I enjoyed it the most. And I've decided to do that again. So I'm going to step in as CEO From the Future probably in a couple of weeks. Haven't announced it yet, so I may ask you to pause this publishing of this.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great news.
And I'm not, and I'm going to go back to what I love and working with clients that make me happy.
Geez, man, that is great. Exciting news. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Happy that we're able to break that story here. We'll release this at whatever time you tell us to do so. I will say this, it is helpful to have a guy that's been around for a while, especially with a few experiences, just to kind of share some of what those experiences are. So thank you for spending the time with us to do that, number one. Number two, your LinkedIn and contact information will be in the show notes at secondbitepodcast.com. I think you're going to become busy now without the time for outside consulting, but it's always good to expand the network. So your contact information will be there. It was great, Lance, having you. I'm excited for your next chapter. It'll be great to watch that as that happens and unfolds. So thank you for spending a little bit of time and sharing your experience and wisdom.
It was great to be here. Thanks for having me, Todd. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.